Hello, everybody. Welcome along to today's episode of the Event Industry News Podcast. My name's James Dickson, and I hope everybody tuning in to today's podcast is keeping exceptionally well. On today's podcast, we welcome Neil Clappison. Neil is the commercial manager for Universal Live, based up in Bradford in West Yorkshire and also with offices in Manchester. Neil, first of all, welcome to the show today.
Hi, pleasure. Thanks, James.
Great to have you on. Just to tell us, before we move on to today's subject, exactly what Universal Live does. In business 29 years, that's right?
Yeah, we started in 1990. We're a technical production company, obviously in the AV hire business, working mainly corporate live events. Excellent.
So I'm sure, broadly speaking, a lot of our podcast listeners and watchers will understand straight away what you're talking about there when we're talking about technical creative production, AV, sound, lighting, staging, set design, all of that stuff. But on today's show, Neil's joined us today to talk about interactive content and interactivity in that particular sector. Tell us why particularly we're looking at that today, Neil, because there is a story behind it, isn't there?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a growing trend. We're seeing it more and more in live events at the moment. And we kind of became aware of this about sort of 18 months ago, how much it was sort of being asked for and requested more and more. But previous to that, it was seen as a very expensive sort of luxury add-on. Basically, one of our... we kind of realised that we were slightly behind the curve with it, so we made a conscious decision to start doing some research and development of our own, started looking into it and started offering it as a service. And quite coincidentally, at the same time, one of our biggest clients, one of our agencies, came to us asking for this similar thing, because some of their big name brands had been requesting this kind of stuff on their high profile events, and they were having to outsource to a specialist interactive company, which we thought, well, there's absolutely no reason they should do that. They should be coming to us because we can do it, and a little bit of research, and we are doing it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just for anybody who might be listening who may be a bit vague about what you're talking about when it comes to interactive content, so put it in layman's terms to us what you were being requested to deliver by clients.
Well, it's anything that's just a bit different from your standard screen, really. I mean, we're talking about new ways of interacting with content, but it's kind of still in its infancy in that there's broad brushes being done with it. In that we're trying to move it out of the gimmicky phase and sort of get some real content, and sort of, because interactivity is great for attracting people in.
Yes,
it's really good for that. Because it's novel, it's new to a lot of people, even though a lot of the time behind the scenes it's pretty straightforward, simple stuff. You're just replicating a mouse click sometimes, but you're doing it with touching a wall or something else, or touching an object. But yeah, so you can attract people in with it because it looks incredible or looks different, but you have to have some decent content behind it, really. Otherwise, you're just throwing your money away.
And this is, I suppose, where the creative part of the creative technical production comes into it, isn't there? Because having the equipment is one thing. Being able to turn up with a great, truck full of hardware is superb. But actually being able to deliver the event that the client wants is something else. And that's where the creative side of the business comes in.
It is, yeah. It's getting all these pieces of equipment to talk to each other, which in previous to this, they haven't really done that. And this kind of interactive element sort of brings all these things together, in that you can touch an object and, it'll turn the lights on, it'll play a video, it'll fire smoke at you, you can do anything really. You play a sound, and it's combining all these things together in a clever way, in a creative way, that enables you sort of to bring to show your content in a really new way that will actually engage with people. Yeah.
any pro end, AV company will tell you that they're constantly reinvesting in equipment and resources. They want to make sure that they've always got the best of the best that's out there, and to deliver what they do. When you entered this process of exploring interactive content delivery and looking at what was out there and what you could perhaps incorporate within your own productions, was there an investment in hardware that had to happen as well once you'd established what you could and maybe should be doing?
Well, we're quite lucky in a lot of the stuff that we invest in as a matter of course for the company, we can use. But we did have to do some pretty serious kind of R&D into the interactive sensors. So we've actually built our own interactive sensors, which are just tiny little things, and they're battery operated, so you can put them into anything. The work over Wi-Fi. So little circuit boards with a battery in it, but they've got an accelerometer in there. They've got a capacitive touch, so they can detect presence, they can detect movement. What else do they do? I can't remember that. But yeah, so there's the hardware, and then there's getting it to talk to a computer, and then getting that computer to talk to all of your AV around the room, which is actually, once you do start getting into it, it's actually pretty straightforward, because the alternative is to use off-the-shelf products, software and hardware, and that's where it does start getting very expensive. Like using software like Touch Designer, for example. You really need to know your stuff just to be able to use that. Whereas just building it yourself from scratch, you can keep your costs right down, and you can make sure that everything talks to each other because you've designed it all.
Does it increase the time between actually having an idea and actually being able to deliver that to a client by having to, or not having to, by making the decision to program and design your own rather than bring an off the shelf solution in?
Obviously, because we've worked in events for so long, we kind of know what the type of thing is going to be requested, or the type of things that we need to do. So we kind of had that in mind to start with. So we're making sure that the things that we build or design talk to everything else, and the most common ways that it's going to be used.
We
kind of build that in from the ground up, really.
Has it changed the way logistically that you've started to plan production builds by having to incorporate, or now with these extra elements in there? Does it increase the time? Is there an extra level of sort of complexity that has to go into the design?
A little bit, yeah. I wouldn't say it's a massive amount, no. And it's normally a bit of an add-on, I'd say. We tend to just sort of separate it out, so the specialists are working on that section, so that the rest of the crew can get on with the rest of the rig or the rest of the event, and work it that way, really. But it's obviously it depends on the event and what they're using and how complex it is. But we'd always sort of make sure there's adequate pre-production in that. But as I say, we're quite confident with the way it's all working and everything talking to each other, that most of the work is already done.
Sure, absolutely. In much the same way that mobile devices and computers will have different operating systems depending on what brand of products they are and where they've come from. The types of hardware that you're utilizing to deliver sound and light and video for productions, will also have now, they're all digitally controlled. They've all got their own way of talking to each other. Do you have to work with the actual suppliers and those companies directly when you're designing your own software to make those things talk to each other?
Sometimes, yeah. For example, we've been doing a fair bit of VR recently in this kind of field. So there's a real requirement at the moment for displaying 360 videos in VR headsets, and because Oculus Go's have come right down in price, you buy one for £200 now, and so people are hiring them out in bulk. So we've done quite a few events lately where there'd be, say, 100 VR headsets, and people coming in, and you stick a headset on and they watch a 360 video. so we had to work out ways of playing all these videos at the same time, and it's just researching, and it's just finding the software, and you can know, like in that example, we found people online that could do it, download their software, put it onto the devices, and it's just having that kind of knowledge to make things work. With regards to the our interactive sensors and things like that, again, that's talk. Well, it's basically having good programmers who know. I don't know enough about it myself, but obviously it's computer language where they can just, these devices can talk to each other on a very basic level.
Yeah.
Which is way above my head, unfortunately.
I know that it all comes down to ones and zeros, but in much the same way, I wouldn't have a clue when it comes to stuff like this. And yet, in exactly the same way as somebody would speak fluent French or fluent Italian,
this is it.
It's amazing now that programmers in the events industry, whether it's designing event apps or CRM systems, they speak this language of code and programming, and they can just do it. They just they'll deliver the solution.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the common tasks they've already done for you in that regard. So something that would have taken a long time a couple of years ago, now there's already something being designed for that, and just drag and drop it in, and there you go, you've got it. So yeah.
In terms of interactivity, you mentioned about the VR headsets and having 100, Oculus headsets. And when I look at things now, I've seen examples of, you can turn a wall into you can project onto a white wall now and turn the whole thing into an interactive touch screen, essentially, with some of the sensors that you've got. Once you've got the basic infrastructure and the technology is built to deliver a certain type of interactive content, it's fair to say that a lot of it becomes very scalable very quickly, doesn't it? You can go pretty big or pretty small with this stuff.
Absolutely. And what people tend to forget with regards to that example with a big wall projected onto that you go up and touch, which is great, and it does look very impressive, but you can project a lot higher than you can touch, unfortunately. So we only touch the very bottom bit, which people need reminding of sometimes. But
this is very true. Unless you did something crazy like turning it into a giant game of snakes and ladders with actual ladders bolted to the walls.
But the answer, of course, is to do it onto the floor, to project onto the floor and do it that way.
Now, of course, and this I suppose just reminds me of something that I first saw. I mean, going back 10 years, maybe even a little bit more, I walked into an exhibition at the NEC. And as I walked in, where you have the sponsored mats, you can sponsor, stickers that go on the floor, and a company had something projected down, and it was fish swimming around in water, and you could, jump on it, and the puddle, and it, at the time, absolutely mind blowing.
Well, you still see it now, don't you? But it's all over the place, that kind of thing. And that was it's just an example of some technology that was totally ahead of the curve, and it's only now that kind of stuff coming into corporate live events.
I suppose the subject of interaction and interactive content could be slightly misleading, because in some respects all content is interactive. You want people to interact with it. You go back 30 years to just somebody turning up with a pair of speakers, put them on a stand, a lectern mic and a projector, or an overhead projector. Anybody taking notes and being actively engaged in conference session is interacting in a way, but how we now define interaction in sort of 2019, we see it as being able to touch or something that's technologically advanced. So do you ever have to find yourself sort of going back to speaking to clients and deciding actually what is interaction, and how are you defining that?
I think in this day and age it's defined with the digital bolt-on, really. It's interaction with digital technology. But I go back to what I said earlier. I mean, I really feel that you need to have good content. There's no point just doing interaction for the sake of it, which I've seen quite a lot of. And, it can be so engaging and it can be so impressive, but if you can combine that with a message or something that you want to get across, or a reason that they will remember it, then you've won. I think otherwise you're just making something pretty for the sake of it, or a gimmick for the sake of it.
It's interesting that you say that, because on a recent episode of the podcast we were talking to 2LK, who is a big experiential brand agency who helped to deliver and create brand activation events and experiential events for big clients, and they were saying a very 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 similar message, that they are in a parallel sector to you, and arguably doing very, very similar things, saying, sometimes it's tech for tech's sake or design for design's sake. There has to be a fundamental to it. Is it difficult sometimes juggling your, I suppose, fundamental role and presence as a technical production company, and almost being like a marketing agency sometimes, where you're actually trying to work on the content with clients to make sure that they're delivering the right thing for their visitors?
Yeah, of course. Ultimately, it's down to our clients. What they request of us, we will advise them, of course. And if we think they're making a mistake, or they think that it could be more cost effective to do it another way, or find a cheaper solution, we're kind of there to help get the message across, not to sort of create that message and deliver it. But we certainly advise on that kind of stuff. We couldn't possibly just sit back and just take the money for the sake of it, because then you're not doing anyone any favors when you do that.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. As I know, your job role as commercial manager will extend far beyond what the job title suggests.
Yeah, very much so.
But when it comes to pitching new business and looking at new ideas, does having this level of interactive content and ability to deliver that type of technology now help you from a commercial point of view, in the sense that you've got that as another string to your bow?
Very much so. 'Cause, people often want that extra something, or that magic element for a pitch, for example, that's really going to wow them. And this is just a great little thing to have in your arsenal, really. We're always trying to think of new ways of using the kind of stuff that we've got, and sort of, just be it like, we had one idea for, if you got 1,000 people at a conference and you split them into 5 breakouts. Well, one of those breakouts could be just a big escape room with 100 people in, and there's all these interactive sensors around the room that they've all got to find. And we're talking, we've done it. We've made these sensors so you can put them in pretty much anything. We made like we've done some blogs online, and we've got a bowl of fruit that turns into a drum kit when you touch it, that kind of thing.
Wow! And
it's great. It's just really good fun. It's just so having this in your arsenal when you're pitching for things, and all the myriad of like possibilities that you've got with these kind of things, all the different clever ways of using them. So that's what it boils down to. It's being creative using them, and doing something a bit different that people are going to remember. It's great to have. Yeah.
Absolutely. And does, I suppose, just without getting too reflective and sort of, looking back, but 29 years in business, it's knocking on 3 decades. Does having such longevity within the industry and such experience with the industry, do you think that also helps when you're bringing the sort of more tech solutions to clients as well? That, there are a lot of new tech companies out there. There are a lot of companies that have sprung up just in the last 2, 3, 4 years delivering solutions, but having that longevity as a company and that history there help you?
I think so. I mean, obviously there's nothing wrong with new startups, and they tend to specialize, and which is why we realized that we were a bit ahead of the curve, because we weren't specializing in interactive AV. We were specializing in everything else, in delivering all the other elements of technical production. So yeah, absolutely. We thought we needed to get on board with that. And so that, our clients that do rely on us to deliver, like, time after time, can come to us with these extra bits and pieces, such as interactive. And rather than just saying, how bad is it to say, no, we don't do that? And when think, well, of course we can do that. It's easy. We just need to just devote a bit of time to it. And suddenly you're in that market, the same as these young startups or 2-year-old companies that are specializing in that one thing. You're there with them. So it's just common sense really, and common sense business practice as well. So yeah.
Do you find as things are developed as well, and I refer a lot to sort of developments in the last decade, but it does seem that certainly in the last 10 years things have just leapt forward so
Yeah.
quickly in the live events industry, particularly in the area of work that Universal Live works in AV production and technical production.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you find that you've worked alongside suppliers more in the last 10 years than maybe you've done in the previous 19? Do you find you'll go into certain projects and there'll be a dedicated sort of Wi-Fi supplier there who you're working alongside with, or does it happen, or do you tend to try and keep everything in-house if possible?
Yeah, we try to do it all ourselves, to be honest. Yeah. We don't. We have close relationships with all our suppliers that supply us all of our kit, and that generally tends to do 95% of what we need. And then for everything, for the little bits and pieces, we'll get people in to work alongside us, but obviously very, very closely.
Sure. I mentioned just sort of on the more, dare I say it, mundane day-to-day stuff. But I mentioned at the start of the episode that you guys, your head office is up in Bradford in West Yorkshire, and offices in Manchester. Manchester, as many of our listeners will know, is a huge hub and place to be in terms of live events and corporate events. But I presume that your work as a business, having been in business that long, has taken you not just all over the UK, all over Europe, and potentially all over the world.
Very much so, all over the world. Yeah. We've just come back from China. They're in Berlin at the moment. We're constantly abroad now.
Excellent. And one thing that I often ask about UK-based suppliers who are working regularly abroad is something that I've said for years, is that I still maintain this view that the UK live events industry is revered in some respects. Suppliers are really well thought of. And what's your experience when you are working in foreign countries and places as far afield as China? Is there this reverence towards UK suppliers that you guys really sort of lead the way?
I get that impression, but no one's directly saying that. But yeah. I mean, it's a funny market, the working abroad, because obviously, as a business, we want to be hiring our kit. Obviously, that's just common sense.
Of course.
But we need to make sure that our clients understand that why we're taking our kit out there. So anywhere in mainland Europe, we'd rather ship our equipment there. Once you go further abroad than that, then it doesn't become cost effective anymore.
Sure. Yeah.
And especially if you've got shipping, then there's massive timescales to think about.
Yeah.
So nobody wins in that respect. So you got to use local suppliers, but we'll be there to sort of help coordinate that and project manage the local suppliers and effectively choose them as well, because that often means flying out there to visit the warehouse, and normally within 5 minutes of seeing a warehouse, you know straight away whether they're good or bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I remember working in sort of Belém in northern Brazil, and it was so it was all local suppliers, and it was just a nightmare. I had to boot the sound guy off his desk and work out how to use his desk room, because it was just, they didn't know what they're doing. And I remember working in Marrakesh, and the sound guy, this is the second mixing desk that they had there, and the sound guy just lifts up the fader, and all you hear is because it's just full of sand. And
wow.
And it's examples like that where you got to sort of politely explain to your client what the situation could potentially be.
Sure. Yeah.
Why you're having to pay these extra trucking costs to take our equipment there. So yeah, it's I do love working abroad. It's just it is very good fun. I think
it comes with its challenges, by the sounds of things.
Well, indeed, yeah. And like places like China, it's you haven't got a chance of understanding the language. Where at least in Europe, you might have one or two like fluent speakers with you, or even yourself, you can get by.
Yeah.
Or they might know some English, but somewhere like China, not a chance. And so you're communicating via hand signals and things, and it's a great experience.
Well, it's subtle things and little things that I suppose you don't realize at first, but when you start thinking about it, you want to know how a piece of kit works that you've brought in, from a supplier abroad,
Mm-hmm.
and take China as the example. You reach for the manual, and of course it's going to be written in Mandarin or Cantonese or whatever it may be. So, it's not just the verbal communication, but it's every aspect of what we take for granted day to day in operations that suddenly you've got to reconsider.
Yeah. And we'll, and that's why in places like China, where we have to use local suppliers, we will still take in our hand luggage the most essential pieces of kit with us. We'll take MacBook Pros, we'll take switches.
Yeah,
we'll take just slide advances, simple bits of that, because they're small enough. We know the work. They're so important. We could probably get by with a dodgy PA. We could probably get by with a dodgy LED wall.
Yeah.
But if your computers are in Mandarin, then you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
And obviously, why wouldn't they be? They're in the language, the native language. So and it's just the value of a laptop that's been set up for a show. You can't just put any laptop on a show. You really can't, because halfway through your show, you're going to get, you might just do an update, a Windows update, or request antivirus software or whatever,
And I don't think it should ever be underestimated. I mean, I've been in the position before, you prepare content and you think, right, that deck is programmed, ready to go. Let's drop it onto a USB stick or onto a hard drive, turn up to the show where you've spec'd what kit that you want. And it's, on the face of it, it's the right kit. It could be the same model of laptop. You plug it in and it doesn't work. It's on the previous version of the operating system, and you've done it on the latest version.
A drive they haven't got or a font,
anything like that. And like you said, the value of being able to just throw things in suitcases now. And I guess that goes back to the beauty about sort of modern technology, is having really powerful computers that can fall down into hardly anything now, and you can throw 3, 4, 5 of them into a suitcase is brilliant. 30 years ago, if you'd wanted to do it, you'd have been pushing flight cases and media servers across Europe.
Absolutely.
We've been talking today on the podcast to Neil Clappison. Neil is a commercial manager over at Universal Live. If you want to check them out, universal-live.ltd is their website. And as I said at the beginning, head office is up in Bradford in West Yorkshire, an area that I know very, very well, being Yorkshire-based myself, and also over in Manchester. But as we've discussed today, working worldwide, and we've been looking at the subject of interactive content and how technical AV production really is being not so much shaped, but certainly is evolving with this increasing demand for interactive content at events. Neil, thanks very much for joining the podcast today. It's been great to have you on board.
Pleasure. No, thanks for asking.
And if you're watching the video of today's podcast, first of all, hello to you. And head over to some of the other pages on event industry news and check out some of the latest features, the news, all of the different supplier directives and stuff that we've got going on the website. If you're listening to the audio version of today's podcast via Podbean or iTunes or your favorite podcast platform, head over to eventindustrynews.com. You can watch videos of all of our podcasts, and as I said, check out some of the other features and content that we've got going on the website. But for now, we bring ourselves to the end of today's episode. Our thanks once again to Neil from Universal Live, and we'll see you on the next edition. Thanks very much. Goodbye.